All right, starting to see people trickle in. Welcome, folks. We're going to get started here in just a couple minutes to give some time for people to get in here and get settled. So as you start to stream in here, we'd love for folks who are on the call to introduce themselves in the chat, tell us where you're coming from, and what you're hoping to learn today. All right, we have a couple more folks joining. Thank you, everyone who's posting in the chat. Appreciate you sharing more about where you're coming from, and thank you to the panelists as well. As you folks come in, I'm just going to reiterate this a couple times, so bear with us. We are going to get started here in just a couple minutes, and they're just going to give folks a couple minutes to get settled. As you come in, feel free to share, again, your name and where you're coming from. All right, a couple more folks coming in. One more time, yeah. So as you come in, feel free to share in the chat your name and what the school is that you're coming from. Would love to see where folks are coming to join the call from. We're going to get started here in just a couple minutes, so bear with us. Also, as a side note to the folks on the call, if you do have colleagues who weren't able to join today's session, we will be recording this and sharing this out with the broader audience. So we'll make sure that that's publicly available for you all as well. All right, so in the sake of time, just so we stay on track, I'm going to get us started here. And as folks continue to trickle in, again, continue to share your information in the chat. We want to know where you're joining from. But just to stay on track for our agenda today, I am going to kick things off here. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to attend our webinar with our North Carolina Community College partners, focused on helping them to innovate academic operations. We are going to cover a couple topics today, so let's dive into the agenda. We're obviously going to start off with some introductions on our side from the panelists. I want to give a little bit of background as to what is the space that Coursedog sits in and what ultimately academic operations means. And then we're going to do some polls as well as some open discussion items on with a couple of our panelists on how they're approaching different challenges that we're seeing in the market today, and how Coursedog's helping them to innovate. And finally, we'll spend some time in the platform very briefly showing you some of the feature functionality that lines to helping to innovate academic operations. If you do have questions throughout today's performance, please just feel free to chime into the chat and we'll try and answer them on the fly. So I'm going to move into the introductions, and I'm happy to start on our side, and then I'll pass it over to our speakers. Hello, everyone. My name is Zach Trollinger. I am the Director of Partnerships here at Coursedog. I've been with the company for about 3 years now. And prior to this, worked at Oracle on PeopleSoft integrations. So I've been in the space for quite some time and very familiar with higher education. I'm actually going to pass it over to my co-hosts here, and I'm going to do it one at a time. Jonathan, can you do me a favor and just introduce yourself and then give us a little bit of a high level about Cleveland Community College?
Yeah, so Jonathan Davis, Chief Information Officer with Cleveland Community College. Been with Cleveland Community College since 2005, so roughly 17 years. Spent my first dozen years here teaching in our IT program as an information technology instructor, and spent the past 5 or so years in the IT department as the Chief Information Officer. So Cleveland Community College is in Cleveland County, North Carolina. Many of you on the call who are in the college system probably have heard of us and know where we're located. So it's good to see some recognizable names and institutions that have joined us for today's call.
Thanks so much for that, Jonathan. And then I will pass it over to Robby as well. Can you give a quick intro on yourself and then also on Isothermal?
Sure. Robby Walters. I am the Chief Information Officer for the college. Joined the college in 2009. I spent the first 20 years of my career in private sector. Learned a lot from there, and then come over to the education side in 2009. So a little bit about the college, we're located in actually the county right beside Cleveland County is Rutherford County, and you see the stats on there about 1,506 FTE. Beautiful campus. It's we've got a lot of challenges ahead. It seems like we're working on building these tools for the college, come up with new innovations and ways to help our students. And that's really the ultimate goal here, is how we can better serve our public and our students. And so we're excited to be in the era of, we have a new president, just came on board last February, and she has really brought some challenges and some opportunities to the college, and especially to the IT department. So looking forward to the panel and discussion of the day, but it's great. I mean, education is, I feel like it's, coming from private sector to public sector, you kind of see the end product, you see students learning, and that's really exciting about it. You're kind of, sometimes you get in the private sector, you're just doing the routines and not knowing really what the company's doing. But here you see a great impact on education, and it's great to be part of that in IT, to bring the technology to students so they can take that to the work field. But glad to be here today and appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Thank you so much for the intro from both of you. So folks, before we dive into some of the open discussion items today, I do want to take a second to kind of center us on the space that we sit in and what we collectively kind of refer to here as academic operations. Academic operations is this new term that gets thrown around, and I think it can mean a lot of different things, but the way that we think about it, and I think that the way that a lot of schools are starting to kind of adopt, is academic operations are all the behind the scenes processes that ultimately contribute to our student success. And so what I mean by that is, what are the processes behind the scenes that allow us to be able to present to prospective students? What are the offerings that we have as an institution and be able to get them to come to our institution? What are the support infrastructure that we have in place to be able to support students at our institution, make sure that they have the ability to be able to graduate with relevant majors and relevant certificates on time by providing them with the right courses, seats and sections, and then also doing the behind the scenes compliance aspects that come into play here, as far as accreditation reporting and academic and policy administration. And the final point that I like to kind of center us as well on is the idea of instructional and space resource allocation. So how are we utilizing our resources on campus be it faculty, be it space, and so forth and so on. Now, academic operations in theory is a fairly simple process. It begins with a new course submission. This is updated into the curriculum. We then schedule this course and have to make sure that it's forecasted appropriately to be able to support our students. And then we need to display this course onto an external interface and make it accessible so students know what this course is, what it's relevant to, and why I should take this course. Now, this is a cycle that should continue and should be a seamless cycle. However, what we see today is that academic operations sit in very large silos from one another, and they're typically managed in one of three ways. So what does that look like in practice? One, we have completely manual processes. And to be honest, this is the majority of the schools that we speak with. We have folks, working across a mix of paper forms, Google Forms. They're walking down to people's offices. They're picking up the phone. They're calling their colleagues. And they're trying, the best that they can to plug all the holes in the boat and make sure everything's working from a logistics angle, but they don't have the ability to be proactive in their planning. They're really being reactive, and they're reacting to wherever fires come up. Now, we have some institutions out there who have taken that initial step where they've started to adopt some solutions that sit in this space, right? You have maybe a digital catalog provider. You have one tool that's doing part of the academic operations lifecycle. But this in of itself, as we're beginning to see, starts to cause some process errors in and of itself, because what we're seeing is just because you fix one part of this doesn't mean that the rest of the parts of this are going to be fixed. And if they're plagued with manual processes, you're actually probably going to be adding duplicative data entry for yourself, which is going to waste time for your institution and the scarce resources that you all have by doing things like managing course proposals and program proposals on paper forms, manually updating those onto the relevant catalog, manually keying that back into the student information system, then manually exporting data workbooks out for departments to do that section level planning, keying that information back into Lucy and colleague, making room assignments, right? Maybe we have a room assignment tool. We then have to export to that tool, potentially key it back in. And with all these happen separately from each other, we also don't have great data. And so what we see across the board is when you have a lot of siloed tools, we typically have not great integrations. And also in that process, you have different data sources. And so typically that causes data flow problems and data governance problems. So you don't have good visibility that allows you as an institution to proactively plan with your resources. Now, the final option here, and of course, shameless plug for Coursedog, is what we all do, of course, right? And I think, the way that we envision this working is an integrated academic operations tool where none of these changes happen in a vacuum. They're all integrated with one another, and they're tightly integrated with your SIS. And as it pertains to the conversation today, making sure that we're feeding all this information in real time, it's syncing directly to your student information system, which is Colleague for the North Carolina community colleges, but allowing you to streamline these processes and save time for your institutions, right? So instead, what we're doing is we're gathering that information for course proposals and program proposals, putting it through the appropriate approval processes. Once it's signed off, we're allowing you to immediately schedule those classes sections, tying relevant spaces to those sections, and then exposing this data to a public website where students can see what is a catalog for the institution, what can I take at the institution, and why should I ultimately come to your institution. Now, with all these processes streamlined in a single integration, we also have a robust reporting functionality. And the goal here is to help you better understand how can I support my students. So how can I predict based off of information on where students are at in their pathways? How should I be sizing courses? How should I be making my space allocations? How should I be using my instructors in the best way possible for the institution? Awesome. So with that in mind, I'm actually going to go ahead and pause for a second, and I'm going to open up our very first poll. So for the folks in the audience, would love to get your thoughts on this question. The question is, how do you manage academic operations at your institution? And we have a couple options here. So manual processes, again, point solutions, and integrated academic operations. So as you get a second to fill that out, please record your answer, and I'll give folks just a minute. Wonderful. I am going to move us forward, but please, for the folks that are still waiting on the poll, make sure that you fill that out. And we're going to jump ahead to the discussion. What we're seeing here is, as anticipated, the majority of folks said that this is done in manual processes, which is the answer again that we would anticipate. This is still a relatively new topic for colleges and universities and community colleges. And so, this is why we're doing these types of thought leadership sessions, to get you all thinking about emerging issues and how it can potentially drive change at your institution. So I want to actually open this up to a little bit of a topic of discussion now with some of our panelists. So for Robby, Jonathan, we've talked a little bit about this in the past, but I'd love for you all to share some high level thoughts here about, as we think about how higher education administrators can take advantage of this digital transformation to improve academic operations. Like, how is this impacting student success from your point of view as you're investing in technologies like this? And maybe I'll start off with, Jonathan, and then we can wrap up with Robby, if that's all right.
So, I think that the community college space is changing at a rapid pace. We're all beginning to focus more and more on data and student success in particular, has been at the forefront of everyone's agendas. For us, everything that's been done in the past couple of years, we have tried to do this on data-driven decisions, doing our best to culminate this data in one place. And in North Carolina community colleges, most of you are doing this maybe through Informer and things like that. We have begun here at our college trying to get that data into other analytics platforms like Power BI. And maybe you are doing things at your institutions with a CRM. And I think Coursedog is another way that you can take this data. And I think Ethos has been a game changer for us. There's two ways you can choose an implementation, and Ethos is by far an easy way to get data out of our North Carolina community college systems and into something else so that we can do a little bit more meaningful work with that data that colleague just doesn't provide for us, at our institutions. So, I think that, the idea is to take this data and to turn it into action. And I think that Coursedog is providing us an opportunity here to, to look at that data, analyze that data, and take action on that data.
Awesome. That's super helpful. And just to take that a step further on your side too, Jonathan, I think a lot of, to your point, schools aren't looking at data whatsoever based on these conversations, because it is a challenge to get to that data. And so in your point of view, and I know Cleveland's, still in the process of getting fully started here, but what is the role that data should be playing in that scheduling process to be able to better inform and support students in your point of view?
So I think that, it's a very manual process for us right now. And for most people on this call, most probably, if you're in North Carolina community college system, I think that data brings an element of collaboration that needs to come. We need to discuss the course schedule. We need to collaborate on the course schedule. We need to take the data that we have once we have been able to analyze that data, and we need to talk about changes that we need to make at our institutions. And I think that our manual processes do not bring that data to the forefront for people. If data that might exist on scheduling, for instance, might be contained in one or two people's offices, and maybe they're looking at it, but that's so much information. And it's so dynamic and it's so precise that the more people you have involved in the process, the better off you will be when trying to make decisions about what to do with that data. And I think that, Coursedog does definitely provide that. You're decentralizing, how many eyes get on that schedule, and building a process in which you enter a department schedule, go through an approval process, run analytics, look at it, possibly before we dump it into colleague. And as we know, once we dump a schedule into colleague, making changes to that schedule is a pain. So being able to see that schedule and do things with that schedule and analyze that schedule and talk about that schedule and make some data-driven decisions about that schedule earlier in the process before we hit colleague, that's a game changer.
Really appreciating good thoughts there on data democratization. Yeah, Robby, same question. Would love to get your thoughts from Isothermal's point of view.
Well, since I've been here, even before I've got here, we've always pulled this data for scheduling and this curriculum through a manual process, through an Excel spreadsheet. So we ask every department to pull together their information at the beginning of the semester and end of the semester, and we pull this to a format of, again, it's just a word processing or Excel document that we've been gathering our data. And I'm not saying it's not accurate. I'm just saying that the speed of the demand for students is leaving us. I think it's going to leave us behind if we don't use these kind of tools. And that's something I think we realize. And then luckily, we come into a new president this year and a new chief academic officer. And so those two have got together and said, all right, we need better data. We need better eyes and how to predict what courses we need to offer, which ones we need to get rid of. You know, you never want to hear that word, but that's the truth. I think you're always looking at how to improve your college, and we got competition. And so what are nowadays with students going online more and more, what courses do we need to be offering and which ones do we need to get rid of and make some adjustments to? And so we've always done this again on a manual process. And I think with the new president and chief academic officer on board now, they're saying, hey, we can do things much better at an efficient, faster rate. And we've got to get this data turned around very quickly. And I think that's where the process has held us up. Isothermal is not having the data fast enough to make those quick decisions, because education is changing very quickly. And we've got to keep up because we don't want to lose our customers. I mean, students are always, to me, considered as a customer because they're paying money, the FTE, and that's what keeps us in business. And so luckily we have great leadership that's seeing the future, what it can look like, and how we can get ahead of the competition.
Really good thoughts there. And yeah, I think we see that at other institutions too, where if you're pulling reports into Excel and you're doing those reports offline, there's a significant lag there to get the insights out of that data, run the reports that you want, and get it to the stakeholders that need it, right? So how can we make sure that that data is getting to the folks ideally in real time to be able to drive decisions that are ultimately going to impact students and help you better compete? I think really good thoughts there. With that in mind, I'm going to move us to the next poll here. So again, for the audience, question here is, how well do you think your institution incorporates data into the course scheduling process? Couple answers here. So we don't incorporate data at all. We use some historical data to project for the future. We pull a lot of reports from our SIS and other sources, but aren't always sure how to use it. We effectively use data to create course schedules. Let me give you all a minute to fill out your answer. All right. Great. I'm going to move on. Coursedog webinar support. Can you give us the results? All right. We got some results here that say we use some historical data to project for the future. We do see, in most institutions today, similar to what these two gentlemen echoed, there's some data being incorporated in the process, largely historical. There's not really a ton of schools out there that can forecast effectively based on this data. And there's a lot of schools out there that aren't even to this point, right? And so there's a lot of data, there's a lot of schools out there that just fully refer on qualitative insights from faculty on how things should be adjusted. How can we move that forward and join in real quantitative data to help us better support our students and better utilize our resources? So again, as we think about, again, how this digital transformation can impact academic operations, and now kind of tying it more toward operational efficiency, this time I'll start off with Robby. What are some of the efficiency gains that you've seen? I know we've talked about automation, but how do you think about improving academic operations from the operational efficiency side?
to us, it's really simple. Here's what's really going to happen. We see the future is going to be. At least now we can have we pull this data in and we're looking at it through the Coursedog software solution. We can see if classes are, are overbooked, and we got rooms that's heavily utilized and other areas it's not been utilized, and which classes are offered the best optimal time and which ones students are not. So that tool right there itself is going to save us, I think, save our future for the college, because we don't have those tools now in place to give us that. And so when we ran through some demos with Coursedog and looked at the training of it, there's, most academic people just kind of stood up and said, hey, where's this been off our life? And so we're thinking having a better visual of that course, the entire course for that organization is going to be tremendously, almost like it's going to pay for itself. I hate to plug that in, but I just think that this is something that those folks in the academic world have really been dying to try to find out how we can get those kind of tools in our hand to give them the better vision of what our class. With the Excel spreadsheet, we kind of see kind of what's going on, but with the tools that we're going to be using in the future, it's going to give us a more of a graphic level of where things really stand at that moment and where really the challenges are at for our students. And that's the whole point about this software is just we got to get these challenges. And school is tough enough for those folks, but how can we make it easier for them? And offering classes on just a certain part of the day or the week and not at other optimal times. And so we see that as one of our big inspirations to take us to the next level of where we can go.
Really good thoughts there. I appreciate you sharing that. And then, yeah, again, same question for you, Jonathan, at Cleveland.
Yeah, I think that, like I said, we're doing these processes manually right now. And when you think about the duplicated work that goes into this and how much time is spent on entering the schedule, and especially when you think about it from trying to project and trying to build a year-long course schedule, if you're not there yet, that might be something. I'm sure that everybody on this call has probably heard year-long schedule. And if you're not there, you probably will be very soon. But, we're having people, fill out a spreadsheet like Robby says, and then or give us your schedules by this date, and they all get sent to an office, and then an office sits there and they turn around and enter that one by one into colleague. And that's a lot of time. That's a lot of people's time. And so, taking, to me, academic operations and software that helps us put these operations into a workflow and a process that automates it, that digitizes it. For example, Coursedog schedule, when we get that up and running, we are going to have department chairs enter that in a Coursedog schedule. The dean will get it. The dean will approve it. It will go to a VP. VP will approve it. It'll go to the person who's in charge of entering the schedule into colleague. And upon that final approval, they will not sit there and enter that schedule into colleague. That schedule will be pushed through Ethos into colleague. And with the click of one button, we can literally take what we have worked on, what everyone has collaborated on and gotten the best schedule, and push it into colleague without consuming that person's time to sit there and enter each of those courses that have already been entered, already been approved, already been tweaked one by one into the colleague system. And those people have crunch times and they already have busy work lives. I think this just makes more time for us in our institutions with our people to make their jobs a little better, to space out their work a little better, and to give them opportunities to focus on other things that we need to do.
Yeah, I think we were going as far as maybe even hire additional personnel just to pull this stuff together, because it's so important. The data was so important for our institution that, okay, so wait a minute now, we can have these tools in place and not to be that additional personnel. So again, working much more efficient, and at a better rate, faster rate. It was, the software obviously is going to work faster than obviously in personnel. And so we just feel like that this is going to save, not that we're against personnel and hiring, but I feel like we can use that resource somewhere else, doing something else for the college instead of doing this and having these tools at our hands to make that job much more easier.
Yeah, I think that makes total sense. And, a lot of the time when we're talking through these types of changes, it's like, why are we using a, strategic resource to move data from one platform to another, or from a spreadsheet into a platform, when they could be doing something to better support our students, or again, better serve the institution. The other thing that, just kind of naturally I'm curious about as well too is, from an operational efficiency standpoint, when you're using these types of tools as compared to spreadsheets, a lot of it, as well as making sure that you're better utilizing your instructional resources, right? And so making sure that you're using your instructors in a smart way, and your space on campus in a smart way. I'm curious how you all kind of think about that portion of operational efficiency as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, it's a time saver all the way around. And, like you said, faculty are here to teach. And the more that we have them focused on, building schedules and, crunching numbers on the schedule and trying to figure out the best schedule, the less time that they have to, work on what they do best, which is teach and innovate. So, having this be more, less time consuming, and getting some of the analytics done for them and centralizing that, in a way that, brings that data, to the front for everyone, and makes it quick and easy to consume and easy to act on. I think that, efficiency is definitely the predominant reason that you choose to go with a tool like this. It's not just to make a job easier. It's to be efficient. It's to make better decisions. It's to improve student success. That's the reason that we do it.
And you would think in education, you all that hear the term, work smarter than harder, like education ought to be on the forefront of that. It's almost like we fall in the same category as other private sector businesses. Like, so here we are saying, all right, we need to set an example. We've got smart people working at our college. And again, we can pull data all day long, and it's working. It's worked for years, but we see the way the world is going, and the way the digital transformation is going for students. We've got to doing a better job as an IT department. And for example, at Isothermal Community College, we got to do a much better job than getting this data into those hands who makes those decisions and making the right decisions. Because it's almost like, you talk to Jonathan, this probably better than anybody. So you'll call around 3 people around the institution and say, hey, what's our FTE numbers? And you get like 3 different answers. It's like, wait a minute, I thought the other guy said FTE was this. And so no, it's really this. And so I just think it's that data too, you collect from the scheduling and courses and the curriculum. It's almost like it could vary, but it's not, it's not off by a lot, but it does vary from person to person. So this gives more of a consistent basis of saying, hey, this is really what's going on in the academic world here at our institution. And so I just think, instead of numbers being kind of all over the place, this gives a better consistency. And again, the way I looked at it with the demos and stuff, and what we've seen so far is it's just much easier to read through an Excel spreadsheet. It just makes more sense.
Really appreciate the thoughts there again, both. So last bullet point I want to touch on just briefly here is, I think we've touched a lot on student success and operational efficiency, and naturally kind of touched a bit about how those tie toward innovation. But more broadly, how do you see this digital transformation impacting innovation looking ahead, right? Where can you go to next now as you think about tools like this and you start to digitize other processes? I'll open the floor. Either you can take that first.
So yeah, I would say, innovate or die is the world that we live in now, especially when it comes to education. I think that, as community colleges in North Carolina, sometimes we forget that, some of us are 57, 58 years old, and we get stuck in our ways. And unless you have innovative leadership, change in leadership and people that are bringing new ideas to institutions, sometimes it's easy to be lazy about change. And, innovation is, of course, at its core, change. And, change, everybody's afraid of change, and especially when it comes to technology. Everybody's afraid of changing to something that, they learn a technology and it's like, okay, I've got it. And then you bring a change and it's like, no, I don't want nothing to do with change when it comes to technology. But I think that, so that's a hard nut to crack for North Carolina community colleges, sometimes based on our age alone. And we've all been here, in these roles, sometimes a long time. And sometimes it's hard to see what opportunities are out there. And I think that, academic operations and tools that allow us to focus on this stuff those are coming now to the forefront. They're available. It's easier for us to integrate. In the past, it hasn't been. That brings opportunities that we haven't had in the past. And it's opportunities to modernize, it's opportunities to innovate. And, that's the way that we need to go. And sometimes, like in the case of, Isothermal, it's leadership change that brings about that innovation. I would definitely say that it's leadership change at Cleveland that has brought about, that type of, questioning and focusing on data and ways that we can innovate and do things better and be more efficient and gain more students. Like Robby said, this is a highly competitive environment. But like we heard in this week's State of the Union address, the community colleges in America are the best kept secret. There's no doubt about that. And I think that, it is our time to shine, and these tools help us get to where we need to be in order to create that innovation, create that change, and be there for our students.
Well, I think that's what I said earlier. Hey, listen, if we didn't have a new president, I might have to have this discussion, because they come in and they see things a lot different, especially a president, maybe it's pro technology, and our president come in and she is definitely pro technology. And she's like, hey, where's the course schedule at? How are we doing an events calendar, and the online catalog and workflows and all this stuff she's mentioning? Hey, we've been talking about this for years. And I think if you have the right leadership and then they're pushing that and they're leading from the top down, you kind of go with that. Okay, this is great. And listen, we were all great and excited. We got a pro technology president at our college, and then we got a new chief academic officer that was pro technology and used a lot of tools where he came from. So I just think that's what pushes it. And then so everybody has these ideas, but how do you get started? And you in our old fashioned way, we get comfortable what we're doing. And even in IT, kind of, hey, the IT's working, everything's up and running. I think we'll be fine. We'll continue this manual process and just try to keep up as best we can. But with leadership, they see the 10-year vision that we don't see. Like, hey, this is where we need to get to. This is where we're at now, and trying to take people's mind there. So it's been really, really good to have that, leadership that's really encouraging. Because people, again, we have a lot of employees that's close to retirement. They've been doing this the same way for 30 years, and how do you get them along for the ride and give them the vision? But it's exciting times for us, because the next 5 years is going to be innovating new changes with new software and the ways we do business, how we're thinking outside the box. And again, me and Jonathan has been kind of partnerships for years with the two schools. We're only about 30 minutes apart from each other. So it really works out well to share ideas and bounce ideas off each other, and what works, what doesn't work. And so, give credit to Cleveland Community College. They kind of help us along the way. We seem like we're always like a year or two behind them. But it's good to have great partnerships with other community colleges to help make those decisions.
Really good thoughts there, and I love to hear the collaboration too among schools. It's great to hear that you guys, aren't necessarily alone. Everyone else, there's a lot of other schools out there that are facing the same challenges, and collaborating can help you guys, both be better prepared for the future. So really good thoughts from both. Moving on, I think that also just, kind of naturally takes us to our next poll question here that I always like to kind of ask folks is, how easy is it to get buy-in from faculty and staff from your institution when you're trying to implement a new technology? And we touched a little bit about this, right? A lot of people are very adverse to change in higher education at times. The options here would be almost impossible, difficult. You can go either way depending on the tool. Pretty easy with a few dissenters, and then incredibly easy all around. I'll give you folks a second to complete your answer. All right, go ahead and move on. So yeah, 2 out of 2 results, almost impossible. We see this pretty much across the board, obviously getting a lot of folks to get on board with a new tool who are really comfortable with the status quo can be a major challenge for folks to move forward, right? But I think a lot of it too is making sure that they understand the bigger picture of what this tool is driving, right? And yes, ultimately, this is going to be a process change, but what are we all here to do? We're here to better support our students. And if that requires us to change our processes or innovate, and it's painful in the short term, it's something that in a lot of cases we should be doing. The last thing I want to pause for from the speakers here, and I'm again really appreciative of both your time, is speaking to your peers in a forum. What are other things that community colleges should be thinking about, or recommendations that you have for your peers as you kind of look ahead with the changing landscape of higher education?
Well, I think I'll jump in on that that buy-in factor that you just spoke about. And I don't know how many people we have on the call from IT, or how many leadership positions we have on the call that make these decisions. But when it comes to buy-in, especially with technology, I think that it is important to involve staff in the selection process for the technology that they're going to be using. And the earlier that you do that, the better. It is difficult to make a decision at a high level and then to push that down without some sort of involvement in the process from people along the way. So, the way we handled our adoption of Coursedog here was that we reviewed what was available. We involved the staff in the academic affairs division in showing them all of those tools. We assisted them in the process of narrowing it down. And then ultimately we asked them, we made recommendations on how we thought things would integrate and work with our existing systems. And we made sure that we only presented options to them that we could effectively implement. But ultimately it was their decision as to what they chose to do. So that would be, my advice is that to get buy-in from staff and to get, where you want to be with digital transformation in your academic operations is to involve those staff in that process early on and explain to them, why you are trying to do this. The biggest factor the biggest issue that people have with change other than fear is not understanding why we are changing. And you have to relate that. You have to communicate that to the staff. You have to describe why it is that you are changing in order to get their buy-in. If they understand the problem and they understand, what's going to happen if you do not solve the problem, then they will themselves adopt and buy in to the process that you're trying to implement. So that's just some advice on the buy-in factor.
Well, I think it goes down to really one word, it's trust. So if they trust the leadership, and it takes time, especially I told you again, new president, new chief academic officer, some other key deans that's been in place last year. They sit back and they kind of watch and evaluate in the trust. And so once you have that, once you feel like the faculty and staff have that trust and leadership, then it's you don't have to sell it. it sells itself. And so with our situation, with this solution, you know, maybe it's because we've been talking about it for like 5 years and what's the best solution. And there's not enough state dollars to support it, to maintain it. And that's always been a scare too. You know, you can always pretty much buy it in year one, but maintaining the maintenance agreement and support and the update and the training for it, that's always been a fear factor of some folks in the financial world is, you know, how do we sustain it? And so, but once you show the trust and show the kind of vision of, hey, this could turn FTE to a positive direction for many years to come. And when you start calculating FTE dollars, then the solution is it's a no-brainer. But I think you got to trust the data. You got to trust how you present it and how it's going to be more efficient and more effective for everyone. And so once they feel like, hey, it'll make my job easier, yeah, I'm all for it. And so I just think it goes back to that, again, that word trust. And it takes time to build that trust, and you can't really break it or lose it too many times because you're going to lose their interest. And if you lose the majority, then it's pretty much a failure on the software.
Really good thoughts there. Thank you both. Moving forward, so I do want to obviously, you know, give a little bit of background for folks on the call. We have 2 product experts here that have joined us and gone through full evaluations. And again, thank you both. But want to give the new folks to the call background on Coursedog. At Coursedog, our mission is to break down barriers to opportunity for students. And we fully believe that, you know, the world's greatest engine for opportunity is higher education. So we are a mission-driven company that was founded by students who weren't able to actually get the courses that they needed and set out to be able to make it better for future generations of students. And we have since built out to this larger picture vision of how can we fix back-end, siloed, broken academic operations processes to be able to help institutions accelerate, better serve the learners of today, better serve the learners of tomorrow, and be able to better support just the diverse set of learners that we have here. In North Carolina, you have a lot of non-traditional learners. You have folks that are part-time parents, they're in the military. You know, they are working a full-time job and they're trying to get their degree. How can we support those students who are non-traditional, not only by, you know, giving guided pathways and being able to make sure that they can be successful at the institution, but how can we tie this to workforce outcomes and say, hey, if you come to Isothermal, ultimately when you graduate, you can expect this salary and you can expect that you could go to this firm and you could get this type of job, right? Let's get folks, again, excited to come to our institution and give them the tools to be successful. With that in mind, you know, I think we've touched on a lot of the major aspects of the platform today, but just to kind of bring it full circle, what Coursedog does by integrating these disparate processes is maintains a single source of truth directly integrated with Ellucian Colleague. Instead of having 4 to 5 to 6 integrations or manual tools or, you know, tens to hundreds of spreadsheets that's manually communicating data back and forth, you have one tool and a single integration that's communicating back and forth with Colleague that's real time through the Ethos APIs. You also have the ability to create transparency for the org. So a lot of working in these manual processes, working in different tools, makes it hard to understand what are changes that are happening, why are they happening, who's making them, how can we prevent them from moving forward? Should we be looking at these changes and changing our policies to better support these? Coursedog gives you a transparent platform to be able to understand how folks are going about these processes, so that way you as an institution can overall improve them and track them as your institution grows. As we see with community colleges, enrollments are fluctuating all over the place, right? With the pandemic, we had them drop down. We've seen a significant rebound. Supporting those changing bodies of students requires different support infrastructure, and being able to be responsive and being able to adapt quickly as those change and grow is really important as we look ahead. Additionally, as we think about scheduling, right? How can we enforce rules and policies, but how can we also make our departments' lives easier? So when they're going to do planning, they're not manually checking every row in a spreadsheet. They're not, you know, having to email every professor 5 to 10 times just to be able to understand when they're free. And then when every late change request comes in, having to make a phone call, have a paper form filled out, whatever the process may be, making sure that we're all kind of following the same guidelines and we're making folks' lives easier in the process. avoiding scheduling errors with those built-in rules. So again, making sure that we are following our institutional policies, and then streamlining processes and reducing costs. So major portion of implementing any software is how can we, save time for our teams? How can we have our teams focused on strategic projects and automate some of these manual processes in the back end? And how can we use the technology that is, prevalent in the private world today to be able to better utilize the resources we have on campus, be it making sure that we're using our space in a smart way, be it making sure that we're using all of our adjuncts or all of our full-time faculty in a smart way, whatever it may be. And so moving on, we're actually going to skip the demo for today, just given the time that's left within this session. But we are going to leave some contact info at the end of this discussion, and would love to get in touch with any and all other institutions in the state of North Carolina who's just curious to learn more about why these schools adopted or how we might be able to potentially help. There's one final poll right here is, would you like to learn more about Coursedog? Feel free to record your answer here. I'll give folks just a quick second. And with that in mind, folks, thank you so much for coming out today. Robby, Jonathan, I really appreciate both your time and your insights here. I think that, you guys have some really great thoughts, and it's awesome that you had the chance to share it with the broader North Carolina Community College community. I'm happy to stick around for a few minutes in case any folks have questions, comments, or concerns. But again, thank you to all attendees. Thank you to the panelists. And hopefully we will talk to you all soon. Awesome. All right, folks, I'm going to go ahead and end the session. And again, thank you all for joining.